Cowboy cried when his horse was bitten by a snake. Until an Apache woman said, "I have a cure," the prairie stretched quiet beneath a pale morning sky, mist still clinging to the grass like breath that refused to fade. A red sun peeked over the hills, touching the earth with slow light, painting the world in gold and sorrow. The cowboy stood alone by the water trough. His name was Eli Carter. A quiet man, mid-30s, shoulders broad, face worn by sun and silence. He wore grief like a coat. His hat sat low. His boots sank into the mud, still damp from last night's rain. His horse, Dusty, a strong black mare he'd raised from a foal, lay trembling in the soft dirt by the barn. Her flank shuddered. Foam gathered at her mouth. One leg kicked weakly at the ground, and her eye rolled toward Eli, wide, panicked, pleading. He dropped to his knees beside her, fingers grazing the angry, swelling wound on her leg. The mark was clear, a snake bite, venom working fast. "No," he whispered, the word escaping like smoke. His hands shook. "Not you." He pressed his forehead to Dusty's neck. She whinnied low. He could feel her heartbeat skipping beneath the skin, like a drum too fast for any rhythm. He grabbed the reins with one hand and gripped her mane with the other, not knowing what else to do. He looked around the empty land. No help, no doctor, no neighbors for miles. The world was too big and too quiet. And then, a soft rustle near the edge of the woods. He looked up fast, wiping his sleeve across his eyes. A figure stepped out from the trees, barefoot, wrapped in woven cloth and beads, hair long and dark falling across her shoulders. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were fixed on the horse. Eli staggered to his feet, half defensive, half desperate. She didn't speak. She just knelt beside Dusty. Her fingers moved with purpose, touching the wound, pressing gently at the swelling. She looked up at Eli and said, "I have a cure." Eli stared at her. The woman didn't flinch. Her hand hovered just above Dusty's wound, eyes narrowed in quiet focus. She looked young, but her stillness held the weight of someone older than pain itself. Her skin was sun-worn, her dress patched, her feet bare. A pouch hung at her hip, filled with dried roots, feathers, something sharp and something soft. Eli took a slow step forward. "You from the Apache camp over the ridge?" She didn't answer. Her hand dipped into the pouch. She pulled out a crushed leaf and something that looked like a dried blossom, ground it between her fingers, then added a pinch of powder from a bone-carved vial. Her other hand gently touched Dusty's heaving side. Eli swallowed hard. "She's all I got." Still no answer. Only when she leaned closer to the mare's leg and blew the mixture over the wound did she finally speak again. "You love her like blood." Eli felt that sentence land in his chest. He didn't respond. Couldn't. He looked down at the woman. "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter. That's not how this works." "Then walk away," she said softly. "But if you want her to live, bring me hot water, and something clean." He hesitated. This wasn't his world. He didn't trust magic. He barely trusted medicine. But he remembered another time, another morning like this one, when he was younger, when his wife had gone into labor and he had ridden 2 towns over to find a doctor. By the time he came back, she was gone. So was the baby. Help had come too late. He blinked, jaw clenched, breath shallow. Dusty groaned. Her hooves scraped the dirt. The woman looked up again, her voice firmer now. "She's got maybe 20 minutes. Less, if we waste time talking." Eli ran into the cabin, grabbed a kettle, lit the fire, found the cleanest cloth he had, a shirt once worn by someone he couldn't talk about anymore. His hands worked on instinct, but his mind fought. Who was she? What was in that powder? What if Dusty got worse? What if this was foolish? But what if it worked? He stepped back outside, steam rising from the kettle, shirt clutched in his hand. She took them wordlessly. Eli knelt opposite her now, across Dusty's trembling body. He couldn't stop watching her. The way she dipped the cloth, applied it to the wound, blew softly as she whispered something under her breath, words in a language he didn't know. He had questions, dozens, but none felt useful. "What's in the powder?" he asked anyway. She didn't look up. "Snake root, wild tobacco, spider flower. My mother taught me." Silence. Then, "Is she—" "She might make it." He nodded slowly, though it gave him no peace. As she worked, Eli noticed a scar on her wrist, pale, long, twisted like a vine. He said nothing, but it stayed with him. So did the quiet between them. Not cold, not warm, just still. He realized she wasn't here for conversation or kindness, and yet she stayed. She could have passed by, could have kept walking, but she stopped for a horse that wasn't hers. And now, so had he, for a stranger who had more silence than a grave. Whatever this was, it had already begun. By dusk, Dusty's breathing had steadied. The swelling on her leg had shrunk a little, not gone, but less angry. The Apache woman sat cross-legged by the barn wall, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. Eli stood nearby, arms crossed, watching both of them. He hadn't left her alone with the horse. He hadn't left at all. "I've got stew," he said finally. "Not good, but hot." She didn't respond. He walked back to the cabin, filled 2 bowls, and returned, handed her one. She took it without a word. They ate in silence until she spoke. "My name's Naya." Eli nodded slowly. "Naya." She kept her eyes on the bowl. "I'm not supposed to be here. Your people don't want mine near their fences." "I ain't my people," Eli said. She looked up for the first time in hours. He added, "I don't care where you're from. You helped her." "Naked?" Yah hesitated, then lowered her gaze again. "They'll be looking for me by now." Eli's shoulders stiffened. "Who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she set the bowl down, wiped her hands on her skirt, and spoke in a voice that sounded like it had broken too many times. "There's a man named Brax. He runs the outpost near Grey Ridge. Deals in weapons, whiskey, bodies. Hires men to keep order. Calls it justice." Eli's heart sank. "I was promised to him by someone who didn't ask what I wanted. My uncle owed him for horses. He traded me." Her jaw tightened. "But I ran, first night, didn't take anything but the clothes, hid during the day, moved at night." She looked at Eli now, her voice cold and clear. "He doesn't like being made a fool of." "Brax'll send men," Eli muttered. "Trackers." Naya nodded. "Maybe 2, maybe 10. Eli stepped back, hand on his hip. He glanced toward the hills, then toward Dusty, still sleeping under the stars. "You brought trouble," he said. "I didn't bring it. It was already coming." She wasn't wrong. Eli rubbed his eyes. This was no longer about a wounded horse. This was about a man who thought he owned people. About land where power was the only law. About a woman who said no. And what that meant in a world like theirs. "You should have kept running," he said quietly. "I did. Until I saw your horse." The wind picked up, brushing her hair across her face. A small braid came loose. A feather fell from her pouch and danced across the dirt. Eli stared at the ground. He should have told her to go. She still could. Now, while it was dark. But Dusty was alive because of her. And maybe that meant something. Or maybe it meant they were all fools. Suddenly, hooves echoed from far off, faint but firm, coming from the ridge. Eli spun around, eyes narrowing toward the hills, not locals, not riders he knew. Nia stood slowly, watching the same line of trees. "You're early," she whispered. Eli's stomach turned. It wasn't just a story now. It was a war, walking toward his land. And he was already on her side. Night fell heavy over the prairie. Eli didn't light a lamp. The moon was enough. Pale light slipped through the slats of the barn, washing the hay in silver. Dusty slept without trembling now, her breath even, her eyes closed. The mixture Nia had used clung to the air, earthy, bitter, strange. Nia sat near the barn door, wrapping her arms around her knees. She didn't ask for a bed. She didn't ask for anything. Eli brought out a blanket anyway and handed it to her without a word. She hesitated, then took it. They sat there, on opposite sides of the same silence. For a long time, nothing moved. Then Eli broke it. "You ever lose someone?" Nia's eyes flickered toward him, uncertain. "What kind of someone?" "Someone you thought you couldn't live without." She didn't answer right away. Then, "Yes." He nodded once, slowly, looked down at his hands. "My wife," he said. 5 years back. Child didn't make it either. Blood loss. I was too late." He picked at the frayed cuff of his shirt. "Tried to tell myself I did everything I could. But it wasn't true. I left her to ride for help, and when I came back, I buried 2 people with my own hands." Nia didn't look away. Her voice came quiet. "My mother was killed when I was 12. White riders came through our camp, drunk, angry, looking for someone else. She got in the way." She exhaled hard, but not shaky. "I haven't let anyone touch my hair since." Eli glanced at her braid. A small bead glinted near the end of it. "That's why you never stopped running." She nodded. "Even when I'm still, I run inside." Silence returned. Not empty this time, but full, as if their ghosts had settled down between them. Eli picked up a handful of straw and let it fall between his fingers. "You saved her life. And now I don't know how to save yours." "You don't need to," Nia said, folding the blanket tighter around her. "Just don't betray it." That landed deeper than anything else. He stopped, walked outside the barn, and stared at the hills. The wind was stronger now. The scent of dust carried with it something uneasy. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "You can sleep in the house. No locks. Just warmth." She appeared at the doorway behind him, still wrapped in the blanket. She looked at the stars instead of him. "Is it safe?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I am." She stepped closer, not too close, and they stood there together under the moonlight. 2 people whose lives had been cracked open by other people's choices, yet still breathing, still choosing. Inside, Dusty let out a quiet sigh. Eli turned to Nia. "If they come by dawn, we'll have to be ready." Nia gave a faint nod. "I always am." And in that shared stillness, between hurt and healing, fear and trust, they both understood something neither had said. The past had broken them, but it hadn't ended them. Not yet. They came just after sunrise. 4 riders, dust trailing behind them like smoke from a fuse. At the front was a thick-necked man with a black duster and a red bandana around his neck. His rifle hung low at his side, but his eyes did the aiming. Eli stood on his porch, arms crossed. Shotgun leaned casually against the post. Nia was inside, watching through a crack in the window. The horses stopped 10 feet from the house. The leader didn't dismount. "You Eli Carter?" the man called. Eli nodded once. "You got something belongs to Brax." Eli didn't blink. "I don't owe Brax anything." The man smiled, slow and mean. "Not talking about debts. Talking about a woman, Apache girl. Ran off with nothing but lies and a curse." Eli's voice was quiet but firm. "She saved my horse. That's all. She's property." Eli's jaw tightened. She's not. The man leaned forward in the saddle. You think you're standing on law out here? There ain't no court between here and Dust Creek. There's Brax, and there's folks who know better than to get in his way. Eli picked up the shotgun. Tell Brax I said no. The man's face hardened. One of the riders behind him reached for his holster. You aiming to die for her? Eli's eyes didn't waver. Already died once. When my wife bled out waiting on a man to show up and care. I'm not making that mistake again. The leader spat in the dirt. Last chance. Turn her over. Walk away. The barn door creaked open. Naya stepped out. Her braid fell loose over one shoulder, the blanket wrapped around her like armor. She moved slow, but her eyes were fire. If you take me, you'll have to kill him, she said quietly. Not a problem, the man snapped, lifting his rifle. Then, a gunshot rang out. But not from Eli, from the tree line. One of the riders cried out and fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. The others spun, scanning the woods. More shots followed. Sharp, precise, warning shots. Someone was out there. Damn it, the leader growled, turning his horse sharply. We'll be back, and next time, no mercy. They fled fast, dust rising like a storm behind them. Eli stood frozen for a second, then looked toward the trees. A figure emerged briefly. Another Apache, older, a man with a bow slung across his back and calm in his stance. He nodded once to Nia and disappeared again into the brush. Nia exhaled. My mother's brother. I didn't think he still watched. Eli lowered his shotgun. He did. They stood in the settling dust, hearts pounding. Nia looked at him. You could have let them take me. I could have, he said. But then I wouldn't be able to look at myself again. A silence passed between them. Not empty, but earned. It was over. For now. But they both knew. This fight wasn't done. Brax would return. And next time, it wouldn't just be a threat. It would be war. The wind had gone still. The land, moments ago choked with dust and gunpowder, now lay quiet, heavy with the kind of silence that follows after something breaks. Eli moved slowly across the yard, picking up the shell casings near the porch. His hands were steady, but his face said otherwise. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of the morning had aged him 10 years in 10 minutes. Dusty stood near the fence, bandaged leg trembling, eyes alert. She hadn't bolted during the shots. She stayed, loyal to the end. Naya sat beside the fire pit, sharpening a thin blade with a rock. Not out of necessity, just something to do with her hands. Her eyes stared into the ashes. She hadn't spoken since the riders left. The sun rose higher, burning away the last of the morning mist. Inside the barn, one of the chickens lay dead, trampled in the chaos. Eli buried it with the same care he once gave to his dog, back when he believed that everything deserved a proper goodbye. Later, he returned with 2 saddlebags and laid them quietly near Naya's feet. She looked down at them, then up at him. You're leaving, she said. We are, he replied. Her brow furrowed. You don't have to. Yes, he said gently. I do. He nodded toward the ridge. They'll come again. I can't defend this place alone. Not twice, not forever. She said nothing. I know a route east. Quiet trails through the rocks. No patrols, no towns. There's a cabin there, left behind by a trapper years ago. We can rest. Figure out what comes next. Nia's lips parted as if to argue, but she stopped. Her eyes moved over the yard, the porch where Eli had stood with the shotgun, the barn where she first touched the horse, the doorway where she dared to step into the open. And she saw it all for what it was now, a memory she could not hold on to. I buried my mother's necklace out back, she said quietly. Did it this morning before you woke. Eli nodded. You want to say anything before we go? She shook her head. Some things didn't need to be spoken. They packed in silence. Eli saddled Dusty slowly, careful not to put pressure on her leg. She groaned once. He but nudged his arm in quiet understanding, as if to say, "I can take this. I'll carry us both." Nia mounted behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist, not out of closeness but balance. He didn't mind. They rode out just as the wind picked up again. As they crested the first hill, Eli paused and looked back. The house, the barn, the trees, all still there, but smaller now, not just in distance, in meaning. "What are you thinking?" Nia asked behind him. "That home never meant much," he said. "Not until it cost me everything to leave it." She tightened her grip slightly. Not fear, but something steadier, something almost like belief. They turned forward and rode on. No goodbyes, no second glances, only the quiet echo of what they'd chosen to protect, and what they had to leave behind. 6 weeks later, a low fog curled through the mountain pines. Eli sat on the steps of a worn trapper's cabin, sharpening a wood carving in his hands. It was small, the shape of a horse, barely the length of his palm, its legs rough and uneven. But the eyes held care. Nia stepped out behind him, a satchel slung over her shoulder. She moved easily now. The tightness in her walk had faded. Her eyes no longer searched the horizon. Instead, she looked at him, steady and still. Dusty grazed nearby, her leg healed but scarred. She didn't limp anymore, though she walked slower than before. She, too, had earned her quiet. Without a word, Nia sat beside him. She pulled a string of dried berries from her pouch and handed him one. He accepted it. The wind whispered through the trees. A fire crackled low inside the cabin. Eli reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He held it out. Nia unwrapped it carefully. It was the carving. She traced her thumb over its ridged back, saying nothing, but her breath caught just slightly, like she'd stepped into a memory she hadn't expected to find. Eli didn't speak. He just looked out across the hills. In the distance, smoke rose from a campfire, not theirs, not close, but there. Somewhere. People move. Perturbed life went on. Danger still existed, but so did the days in between. Nia tucked the carving into her satchel and stood. Eli followed. Together they loaded a small bundle of supplies onto Dusty. No destination spoken, no plan written. They had what they needed: a name, a path, a second chance. As they rode off, the morning sun broke through the fog, spilling light on the trees ahead. And as the wind pulled back Nia's hair, Eli noticed something new. A single white feather woven into her braid, clean, bright, whole. The last thing the land saw as they vanished into the trees was the rhythm of a horse, the quiet of two souls who had been broken, but had not stayed that way. And the wind carried with it the final truth. Sometimes healing doesn't speak. It simply stays.